everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for clicking on this, clicking onto the stream. You're very much welcome. I'm Dr. Sylvia, general practitioner and health educator, and you are in the AskAwayHealth space. Welcome to our channel. This is an impromptu live stream, and it is off camera because it's just been a very, very busy last 24 hours. I planned to do this yesterday, and a few things happened. So both the live streams I planned yesterday evening couldn't happen. So yes, this is the next best thing. So hopefully you're going to watch this on the replay. I don't think I'm going to get many people joining this, but well, no problem. I think the important thing is just to pass the message across. And if you do happen to catch this live, that's amazing. You're welcome. Please leave a comment or drop a question in the comment section. And of course, if it's relevant to the topic, I'll be happy to give it a shot for you. So we're talking about ovarian cancer, and this live stream has been inspired by a couple of articles I've come across in the last week, which you probably have come across them as well, but I wanted us to have a look at them and just take a shot at what they mean. And this is part of my Watch This Space series that I'm just developing. I think this is the third video in the Watch This Space series. So I'm just developing that series as a look at current medical topics, new things that are emerging in the medical space, what they mean for us, what research could indicate, how much should we trust or rely on the research. That's what Watch This Space is about. Anyway, I hope you're doing well, and welcome to a new week. We are what now? So yeah, pretty much going towards the end of July. Just a few days, it will be August. So yeah, well done for getting to this point. So guys, my voice is low, and hopefully you can hear me because I do have my mic on, but my voice is low because it is still quite early around me, and people are still trying to wake up. Because we have all sorts of really interesting hours in my household. I work nights, so we have all sorts of early morning can mean different things to many of us. Anyway, I hope you're doing good. Let us look at this topic. This is the reason I wanted us to talk about it. Let me just share my screen and let me show you some of the headlines that I've come across recently. For example, this is one from the Mirror. Is it the Mirror? It is the Mirror. Says occupational hazard, the 7 jobs that mean you're more likely to get ovarian cancer is yours on the list. I beg your pardon. I think anybody seeing this type of headline would be pretty worried. And in fact, they go on to break it down a bit further. They say hairdressers have a higher cancer risk because of chemicals at work, a study shows. Women who spend a long time working around talcum powder, bleach, dyes, and spray cans are more likely to get ovarian cancer. So this is a very worrying headline. I think the Sun could have done a lot better with this headline, but we are going to look a little bit into this with this live stream. And let's see if I've got another one. So that was the Mirror, or that was was that the Sun or the Mirror? Gosh, I've got myself mixed up now. That was the Sun I just showed you. Let me share with you the Mirror. This is the Mirror. Perhaps this was slightly, this was probably slightly, Mirror was a little bit more responsible, I would say, because the Mirror said ovarian cancer risk increases with these 7 jobs. Check if yours is on the list. And then their first paragraph goes, or the introduction says, a new study has found that women working as hairdressers and beauticians are among those at higher risk of developing ovarian cancer, but scientists said more research is needed. Okay, so I prefer that headline. That is certainly more balanced, and I think that's more relevant to the subject. Please give this video a like, and of course, subscribe to the channel if you're interested in these kind of reviews. If you're just joining, you're very much welcome. Happy to take any comments, questions. What did you think? Have you seen these headlines? What did you think? Did it bring up any concerns? And so on and so forth. Okay, so I want to just share a few thoughts about this study, which I have got the actual study. I have looked at it and, looked at exactly what the study says, which is a little bit different from what the headlines of our papers said. And if you are a woman and you are in any of the jobs or exposed to any of the agents that this study talks about, how worried should you be? That is the thread of this video. So let me pull that up and share with you. That's the next one that we're going to share. So I've shared with you the articles in the Sun and in the Mirror, and now I'm going to share with you the actual article. Let me just pull that up. So this was an article published, so hopefully you can see this now. So this was an article published this month, just this month, in the Occupational and Environmental Medicine segment of the British Medical Journal, so a reputable journal, of course, as you would imagine. And let me give you a little bit of background about the study, which I'm going to put the link in the description box because it is not linked in any of these papers. But I will share the link for you in the description so that if you want to, you can sit down and go through the study. And of course, you can make your own conclusions. I'm just going to touch a few things and then we can move on. The important thing for me is that women watching or listening to this come away with what is the most appropriate conclusion. So not panic, don't rush to any judgments or anything. What did this study actually find? Because I think from those two headlines that we saw, I shared with you earlier, you're probably going to have a lot of clickbait. There's a lot of clickbait in there. They want you to click on it and they don't really give you substance. So you're not sure. You're left wondering, well, what should we do? Should I be concerned or not? Okay. So this article was published just this month, I believe, in the BMJ. It's a population-based study that was conducted in Canada. And the information, the data was gathered between 2011 and 2016. Okay, so it's a Canadian-based study. And what they did in the study, they were looking at the work history of women. About nearly 1,400 women were involved in this study. And about nearly 500 of them actually had ovarian cancer and the rest didn't. So the rest were acting as controls. So they were looking at the work history of these women and possible exposure to certain agents. And I'm going to talk about the agents in a moment, but just to give you a background about what the study actually looked at. So they were looking at these women's work time history throughout their lives, because they called it a lifetime occupational history. So they were looking at these women's, the types of jobs that they'd held down for most of their lives. And we had nearly 500 of these women had ovarian cancer, while the rest out of the almost 1,400 people altogether did not have ovarian cancer. So they were looking at the relationship between exposure to a group of chemicals or agents and developing ovarian cancer. And they were also looking at any relationship between a particular kind of job or occupation or industry and ovarian cancer. So let's quickly look at the jobs first of all. Or should we look at let's look at the jobs first of all. So they looked at accountants, people who'd been employed as accountants for more than 10 years. So they looked at accountants. I'm just highlighting them. That's where you'll find that information. They also looked at hairdressers, barbers, beauticians, and people in that related industry, anybody in that industry, doing something in that industry. Then they looked at clothes makers, tailors or sewers and embroiderers. Then they looked at salespeople, shop assistants and demonstrators in the retail trade and construction. These were the particular roles that they observed some possible relationship with ovarian cancer. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Let me just be quiet about it for now, because I'm going to mention a little bit about this possible relationship. The other thing they looked at was these agents. Okay, so there were, let's have a look at the agents here. So they looked at 29 agents, but they found some association, some positive relationship between ovarian cancer, developing ovarian cancer, and cosmetic talc, ammonia, hydrogen peroxide, hair dust, synthetic fibers, polyester fibers, organic dyes and pigments, cellulose, formaldehyde, propellant gases, aliphatic alcohols, ethanol, isopropanol, fluorocarbons, alkanes, mononuclear aromatic hydrocarbons, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons from petroleum, and bleaches. So these are the key things that they looked at with these studies. They were looking at certain types of occupation and they were looking at certain agents. And in the midst of their study, they found that there was some association between developing ovarian cancer and some types of occupation, some jobs, and I've listed them for you, and exposure to certain agents. And their conclusion was that certain jobs or industries and certain work-related exposures may be associated with developing ovarian cancer. And further research is needed to provide a more solid grounding for any conclusion. So that's what the conclusion says here. And like I said, I will share this with the link with you. You can take time to read through this. And I think that's what's really important and what is missing from those clickbait articles that I shared with you earlier. But we've looked at the study. We've looked a little bit at the study. Let me share with you something I came across. And this is from, this was from Sky News, which clearly quite, they've their reputation is important to them. See if I can find Sky. Okay, so let's see how Sky News presented it, and then we'll go back to the study. So this is Sky News on pretty much the same topic, and it was published on the Tuesday, the 11th of July. Yeah. So Sky News is a reputable UK broadcaster. Now it says women in certain jobs may be at higher risk of ovarian cancer. So they've put in quotation marks, they're quoting, and they refer to the researchers found that women who worked in accountancy for a decade were twice as likely to develop ovarian cancer, while construction workers were almost 3 times as likely. So the problem I have with this statement is it doesn't really give you the conclusion. It tells you what the study found, but the study itself is not perfect. It's not a perfect study. It doesn't take into account so many things. This is why I quarrel with this headline, and I think it is unnecessarily scary to a woman who has been an accountant for a decade and a woman in construction to see this headline and think, oh my goodness, am I at risk? And then you start worrying about whether you're in the right occupation. You start getting concerned about things. And further down, Sky says hairdressers, beauticians, and accountants could be at a higher risk of developing ovarian cancer, a new study suggests. And it's only by the time you get to the third paragraph, if you even bother to read the entire thing, which many people may not. It says the authors of the study stressed that inferences, that is conclusions, from the results are limited, as they called for more work to examine the links between ovarian cancer risk and different occupations. Give me a second, guys. Okay, so yeah, I'll put the link to this in the description box as well. But this article from Sky at least took some time to review the journal and give you some more of the details. They have a level of detail in the Sky News report that is clearly missing from the Sun and the Mirror reports. And they provide the information. So if you go through the entire article, I think you will come away with the impression that, okay, this is still a study that's suggesting some things. It is not, there is nothing definitive about their conclusion. In fact, the only thing that is definitive about their conclusion is that you need a lot more research before you can make any conclusion. So they are definitely not saying that a woman who has worked as an accountant for over 10 years is at is definitely is twice more likely to develop ovarian cancer than a woman who hasn't. And they're definitely not saying that a woman who has worked as a hairdresser will have thrice the risk of developing ovarian cancer, because you don't yet have that conclusive evidence. Can we actually say that certain jobs could be linked to a greater risk of disease? You can't even say that. So there's so many things that we can't conclusively say. But the study just makes you ask questions, which is what research does. You put forward some questions and you get some observations, which makes you think, should we take a closer look in this area? And that is what they're calling for. So please be careful when you're reading this. And, when they say shop assistants and salespeople have a 45% increased risk, that is within the limits of this study of nearly 1,400 women based in Canada. Now, if we just take a moment, let me just pull this back. If we just take a moment, and consider ovarian cancer and what we know causes ovarian cancer, there is still a lot that we're not aware of. And if you go to websites like Cancer Research UK or Target Ovarian Cancer, for example, to look at what are the risk factors. So let's just do that. Let me share with you Target Ovarian Cancer, which is a site in very easy and friendly language for non-medical people who just want to gain information about these conditions. So this is Target Ovarian Cancer. What are the risk factors? So let's just quickly scan through this. They talk about things like age. The risk of ovarian cancer increases as you get older. And that was this study that we're talking about from Canada. The majority of women in this study were aged between 55 and 64 years old. That is those with diagnosed ovarian cancer. And then the second largest group were over 65. So that is consistent with what we know. And then there is a little bit, about 20%, 20 out of 100 cases of ovarian cancer where there may be a family association or inherited gene. You might have heard of the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. So there may be some family history relation with that. Other risk factors are things like weight. So being overweight, obesity may have a small risk with ovarian cancer, of developing ovarian cancer. Use of talcum powder used to be very popular when I was a medical student some decades ago. But it's controversial. And according to Target Ovarian Cancer UK, says the evidence to show a link between using talcum powder between the legs and ovarian cancer is limited. So there were some old studies that suggested that there was a link, but more recent studies have not shown that link. And again, a lot more quality research needs to be done to see if there is anything at all in that story. But this is a practice that hopefully is not common, using talcum powder between the legs. Hopefully this is not a common practice as we talk about women's hygiene and feminine hygiene products. So hopefully this practice is not very common. But just looking at the link, the risk, it's controversial. We don't know. There were just very weak links with older studies. Use of HRT, endometriosis, smoking, diabetes. So these are things that may have some association with ovarian cancer development. And we didn't really have anything to do with occupation, the type of work that you have. The exposure to agents is something that, yes, that is interesting. I think that's important, because we do know, we talk about environmental factors and the possible risk link to cancer, I beg your pardon, possible link to cancer. So that in itself is important. I think one of the strongest links we have with an occupational hazard or exposure is with asbestos and developing things like lung cancers, cancers of the tissue around the surface covering of the lungs, the pleura. So we have that clear association between asbestos and those types of respiratory cancers. And that's one of the most common ones that we know of. In terms of being very confident that there is a clear link, there's a clear cause between a particular agent and a particular work exposure and cancer. That is one that we're fairly certain about. We're not sure about many others. There is just a suspicion there may be this relationship. For example, bladder cancer and exposure to what you call these petrochemicals and hydrocarbons. So there's suspicions. So I would want us to be very careful interpreting the results of this study. And I don't believe that the authors have tried to overpresent their findings. They have been very clear that they've told us what they observed in this study. They took nearly 500 women with ovarian cancer, and they had nearly 900 who did not have ovarian cancer. They looked at their workplace exposure, where they've worked for years and years, and tried to compare to see in which of these particular jobs or in which particular professions did women develop cancer. And so we could say that possibly their jobs were related to developing cancer, or the exposure to these agents were related to developing cancer. Okay, so let's go back to the study. So let me share the study again. And if you're just joining, welcome. We're just exploring this study. Let me go to the, yes, I was saying, I have no beef with the writers of the study. They said to us the things that were added in this study. They said this population-based study is aimed at generating new hypotheses, so that's new theories, okay, to explore occupations, industries, and certain occupational exposures, okay. They said they observed associations suggesting that accountancy, hairdressing, sales, sewing, and related occupations may be linked to excess risks. So it's still a suggestion, it's still a maybe. There's nothing that conclusively puts that link currently to ovarian cancer. Many of the specific occupational exposures that were suggestively associated with increased risks were related to hairdressing related occupations. Due to the imprecision of our estimates and the presence of multiple correlated exposures, inferences of these results are limited. Yes. So this is actually, this is key. This is the really important bit of these findings, that you cannot run away with this study and assume. So this is the study we're looking at that's been published in the BMJ just this month. This is the study we're looking at of occupational environment, that is workplace environment, and the risk of ovarian cancer. And the authors are saying that we made estimates. Number one, they made estimates. The estimates were not precise. And there were other possible, in fact, many other, because it says multiple. It wasn't just one more correlated exposure. There are other correlated exposures. So it could be, there may be other things that could explain why that particular woman got ovarian cancer, not necessarily that because she was a hairdresser, or because she was an accountant, or because she was a seamstress or an embroiderer, okay? So that's really important. And I just wanted one more thing before we go, just looking at their discussion. So this is a discussion bit of the study. And for those of you who are non-medical, I've gone through it, and they said they observed these things, and they felt that women working in accountancy, hairdressing, sales might have increased risks, okay? But they didn't see that. And they gave an example of women who had reduced risk, which I thought was an interesting finding. Professional nurses were thought to have a reduced risk of developing ovarian cancer. So these are interesting findings. However, nothing to draw any hard conclusions about, nothing to assume. It is true that some of these agents, and I listed them earlier, that this exposure to these agents could have some cancer relation, but then we're not 100% certain. Recently, it came out in the news, I think the World Health Organization telling us about the association between, what's this sweetener? Aspartame and cancer risk, which is something that for years there's been concern. Could there be something? Could there be something? So research is evolving. We're always asking these questions. We're doing more and more tests. But according to the studies, they said, given the presence of multiple correlated exposures, we are unable to determine whether the elevated risks that they saw for these agents are particularly associated with hairdressing related occupations were driven by a single agent, a combination of agents, or other workplace factors. So that's really something to, we need to double down on. Women working in hairdressing related occupations, so that's this segment here, are exposed to hundreds of chemicals at high concentrations, including hair dyes, shampoos, conditioners, styling cosmetic products. In our study, employment in hairdressing related occupations and exposure to 12 agents were suggestively associated with increased risks of ovarian cancer. Okay, but it does say, however, to date, the overall evidence for this occupation remains inconsistent. Okay, so there are a lot of potential associations between these agents. There are a lot of possible links, but there isn't yet anything, any firm connection, any firm tie, or any firm evidence to say that using this particular agents like hydrogen peroxide or cosmetic talc, or using the dye products that women use for their hair, or agents that might be included in shampoos and conditioners and so on. We don't yet have that evidence, but it's good to ask these questions. It's good to bring this out. I think this is what's important about research. This is what's important about us asking the question. So this is what, this is what's important about us asking the questions. What is the connection? What is the relevance? But not to panic when we come across certain reports that could potentially, make women afraid, or give people unnecessary health anxiety, I think is the best way to put it. So I think my quarrel really will be with the reporting of this information. It's useful for us to have the research. It's useful for us to have the questions asked. I'm sharing with you the paper from Sky because I think, to my mind, that seems to be the most I think that seems to be out of the three examples I've shown you, that there was some degree of reasonable or responsible reporting. Let's see how they concluded their report. Let's see. Okay. So it says, in a linked editorial, academics from the National Cancer Institute in Maryland in the US point out that women are underrepresented in occupational cancer research studies. That's another problem. So this was a small study, wasn't this? Was 1,500. So how do you make a decision out of a study of 1,500 where less than 500 people actually had ovarian cancer? So it's a small study, but they said the study reminds us that while the lack of representation of women in occupational cancer studies and even potential strategies to address this issue have been long recognized, there is still a need for improvement in studying women's occupational risks. Yes, I completely agree. All right, guys, we have spent a long time looking at this, and I thought it was important because I don't want you worrying about your job and possible risks of ovarian cancer. I will still say that please come and talk to your doctor if you do have any symptoms that might suggest ovarian cancer. So that might be bloating, feeling full very quickly after eating, you think your abdomen's getting swollen, losing weight, feeling unwell, if you have a family history of ovarian cancer, if you're just worried about it, come and have a chat. There's some tests that we can do, blood tests, scans that we can do, because it is a very serious cancer. UK studies suggest that there are 7.5 or thereabouts thousand new cases every year, diagnosed every year of ovarian cancer. And it is a very serious condition. And the usual principle is the earlier that we catch such cancers, the better. in terms of treatment and prognosis. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. You might have come across these headlines and you might have wondered. I'm going to put the link for all the different links, the different documents and papers I've shared in the description box below. And of course, I welcome questions if you want to ask or clarify anything with regards to this topic. Thank you so much for listening. I know it's an unusual time of the day, but I do have a lot of things planned with Fibroid Awareness Month, but I wanted to get this out and just, if anybody is concerned, hopefully come across this video. So please share it. If you watch it, please share it. The information here could just help to relieve somebody, or might even push somebody to go to their doctor and express their concerns, and you might actually be saving somebody's life. Please don't forget to like this video and of course subscribe to the channel if you've not done that already. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you again soon. Bye bye, guys.